And hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Most Important Conversations. I'm here with September. How you doing today, September?
It's been a while, Chad.
It's been,
Come
as they
on.
say, a minute.
It has been a minute. A
Who
hot
knew?
minute.
Who knew how long minutes could be? Minutes is so long. Nobody's ever experienced a minute that long. I'm starting to sound like the president. So, September, I was thinking today that we could talk a little bit about discernment,
What a great topic. Woo.
right? It
Yeah,
is a
there's
good
a lot of
topic.
gray area to that word.
There is. And I think it's relevant at this moment in time. So, we're in the throes of another Trump administration, and there's a whole bunch of stuff being thrown at the wall. It's kind of like throwing spaghetti at a wall is a strategy all of a sudden to see what sticks. I wouldn't call that a strategy. But anyway, that's what's going on right now. And a lot of people have kind of been sucked into one or two different camps, or sometimes three camps. And when we talk about discernment, the first thing that comes to my mind is people cannot discern if they don't know how to listen. And listening is something that we haven't been doing very well as a culture for a while. We're not listening to each other. We don't know how to listen to ourselves. And if we don't know how to listen to ourselves and to each other, it's going to be very easy to get sucked in to a worldview and duped by it, quite frankly. People are very easily duped when they have no access to accurate information, when their belief systems are overwhelming their ability to listen and discern because they want to believe something to be the case, confirmation bias. It's like wishful thinking. I want this to be the reality. And then so they're easily duped by people who are selling them that reality. It's like the fish oil salesman of the 1800s who would stand up on a stage at a carnival and they'd hold a clear liquid in a bottle up and say, "This will cure everything." And people are like, "Oh, I want something that cures everything. I want to believe that's true. I want that." And then everybody would buy it. It was water or something useless. And the guy would leave town and take all the money with him, right? And so this is not new in the human experience. Humans regularly can get duped into believing things that they want to believe. Discernment's the exact opposite of that. So I want to pause for a second and get some of your thoughts on that, and what have you experienced with respect to that, either in your own life or in the culture, or is anything kind of coming up for you around that?
I would say that discernment, through what I've learned about it in terms of an experience, I would say that it's more than just a decision-making tool or a tactic. It's about perceiving the truth that's beneath the surface and recognizing patterns and filtering noises from signals.
Very well put.
And I would also add to that there is a fine line between discernment and judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That judgment, it feels, in terms of an experience, it feels more reactive, that's rooted in a bias or a past experience. Whereas discernment is more about clarity. I love that word. It's more about clarity and wisdom and strategic insight. It's that slowing down to speed up, paying attention, whereas judgment assumes and discernment is more of an inquiry and a checking in. But as you were talking about this listening aspect of it, it has a lot to do with, at least what I found for myself, that it has a lot to do with listening to a deeper part of myself, being clear about where is that information coming from me? Am I being judgmental? Is this a bias that I have? Am I perceiving something based off of past patterns and experiences? Or am I really finding the clarity beneath the surface? Am I weeding out and separating the noise from the signal and paying more attention to that signal and the noise?
Mm-hmm. And there is a ton of noise these days. Ton of noise. So people can relate to noise two ways, maybe three ways. First, they can ignore it. And I think that's what's starting to happen or has been happening now for a while. There's so many people who are just checking out, shutting their ears and eyes off and saying, I don't want to hear this anymore. Especially in political and business discourse, there's a lot of people who are just like, I can't take it anymore. The constant social media, cage match, social media has become like the World Wrestling Entertainment, organization, but it's just like nothing, especially if you're on Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I know some people call it X, but what do you do if you're on X and what we used to call tweet something? Are you Xing something? Like, what is that even? You know what I mean? It's never been addressed. So it's like, it's so messy, right? So it's been relabeled, renamed X, but people still call them tweets.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that's just endemic of the chaos of this moment, that it's just everything, everywhere, all at once, like the movie. So one way is that people will tune out. They'll just shut their ears off. Another way that people deal with the noise is they only pay attention to that which already conforms to their already held belief system. So it's confirmation bias. So in the noise, they're only paying attention to things they already believe and agree with, even if what they believe and agree with is complete bullshit. So they're not allowing themselves to be edified. They're not allowing themselves to learn, to grow, to evolve, because they're only paying attention to what they already believe. So it becomes this recursive reinforcement loop. And they dig in and they get deeper and deeper and deeper and stuck. And frankly, both are paths to ignorance. Whether you completely ignore and shut down and shut off, you're on the path of ignorance. Or whether you only pay attention to that which you already believe, you're on the path to ignorance, because you can't learn anything new. You're only going to pay attention to what you already know and believe, right? And I put know in quotations, because so much of this is not a knowing like a fact. It's more a fantasy, a wish or a hope. I wish reality was like this, so I'm only going to pay attention to people who tell me it is like this, And then there's a third way. Let's call it as a sort of homage to the Taoist principle of the third way, what they call in Chinese culture the third way. Instead of the two extremes, where we only pay attention to that which we believe or we ignore everything, learning to listen, like you were just talking about, is really an art form. It's the ability to, first of all, be emotionally sober, to be in the presence of situations, information, or people that you do not agree with, you may not even like, but you're practicing emotional sobriety. So you've got those emotions that may be reactionary to the people or the circumstances or what they say, but you don't react. You're able to process that, integrate that, and be present to hear and learn something that may or may not be factual. But that's where the discernment comes in. But you have to expose yourself to information that is not what you already believe, and that you're not completely ignoring, in order to practice the art of discernment. Because discernment is where you're looking for a couple things. You're looking for, is what's being said or what I'm experiencing in alignment with me? Not, do I like it? Not, do I wish it to be the case? Is it in alignment with me as an essence? Most people can't even answer that question because they don't know who they are as an essence. They're a walking reaction, a walking conditioning based on family culture or community culture. They're trapped in a worldview that they were taught as a child, and they're just continuing to perpetuate that. So most people don't know who they are. So if you don't know who you are, you can't discern whether the thing you're being exposed to aligns with you. You're the authentic you. But if you happen to have been doing some work on yourself, first you want to know, does it align with me? Right? How does it feel? And next is the inquiry is this true? Is this something that I can validate from other third parties to know that this is a piece of information that I can count on in order to make choices around? So does it conform to me? Does it align with me? And is it true? there are many things that are true that don't align with me, in which case my discernment would say that may be true, but that's not for me. So I'm going to go find someone else or another situation or whatever, even if that may be true. Like, it's true that it snows in New York in the wintertime. I don't think anyone would doubt that, but you never know these days. There are people who think the earth is flat. So there's that, even though we have pictures of it from space clearly showing it's round. But let's pretend that's not. See, that's how crazy things are right now. I want there to be a flat world. So I'm going to say there is.
Okay.
I want no snow in New York in the wintertime. So guess what? It does not snow there, right? So that's a truth. Now, that might not align with me. I might not be a snow person. So my discernment will kick in and be like, it's probably not a wise choice for you to move to New York City, right? That's just a very overly simplistic example.
Yes.
But so something can be true and I don't need to tolerate it.
Mm. I think you outlined some wonderful steps. I think the thing that I would add to that is the slowing down. The slow down impulse kills discernment, I believe. When we're impulsive and we act, in a reaction mode. We talk a lot about that in WLA, being a walking reaction to everything. And I would say that our best discernment, our best decision making comes from a place that's centered in awareness.
Yeah. And
And there's
presence.
so many layers to that, though. So when you talk about awareness and you were saying, we have like part of our trauma selves are ruling our life and making decisions for ourselves. And there's so many layers to that. I really appreciate the internal family systems therapy model where it helps to identify all the different parts of you. And I think without doing that type of work, without understanding, you had made the statement, who am I? Knowing who you are. Well, knowing who you are is not as simple as to say, I am this one entity. There's so many different parts of us that make up who we are, that it's our job and responsibility to know those parts of ourselves and develop relationship with those parts of ourselves so that our core self can show up. And when you think about it, some of our trauma response personalities are there to protect the core self, to keep that core self safe. But in order to help those parts of you put those guards down, it's a process of relationship development within yourself. So for me, I think it's going to be very difficult for people to really hone in on the skill of discernment. It is a skill that is used in your life, whether it's leadership or business or your own personal development. But discernment is a skill that has to be developed. I don't think it's something that we're innately born with. I think it's something that we have to learn about ourselves. And that slowing down process is critical. Slow down to speed up. I heard that phrase years ago and I heard the phrase. Just like, you don't know what you have until it's gone. It feels very cliche until you actually have an experience that backs that up, that correlates with it. And so the slowing down, it is about centering yourself in an awareness of who you really are. And then moving into what you were talking about, the checking alignment. Does this align with where I'm going in my life? Does this align with what I'm creating for myself and for the world around me? And asking the deeper questions. I find it to be very challenging to dig deep in the questions when you are not even fully aware of all the parts of you, why they show up, where they came from, what do they need? I think that's really important to focus on as well, as especially in the beginning of understanding yourself, of what does that part of me need? Why does it show up that way? And there's a lot of questions that go around that. And the observation of patterns. Is there a theme? Is there a behavior? You kind of touched on that a little bit as well. Is this a habitual pattern for me? Because I just don't like this person. So therefore, I'm immediately going to say no. When, all right, I'm paying attention to that feeling. Let me dig a little bit deeper. To me, that's reactive. I don't like the person. I'm not going to work with them. I do have relationships like that in my life. I was having a meeting today with somebody on the team and they're saying, oh, I ran into so-and-so. And I was like, that is bad news. No way. I'm not engaging with that person. It's just bad news. but I don't need to slow down and look at that process. It's nothing personal. It was more of an integrity issue that showed up over and over and over again. So there's the pattern. And is this person in alignment with where I'm going? Absolutely not.
Hmm.
No. And then also the balance of trusting intuition and intellect. There's a balance between that logic does play a role. Analyzing things are important. And both need to be balanced between the intuition, what's your gut telling you, what's your heart telling you, wherever you feel that core messaging coming from in your body, lean into that. But there again, if you're unaware of where that core voice, that inner knowing is coming from within your body, it can be very difficult to even pay attention to and listen to that, which then takes
Hmm.
right back to the beginning process of slowing down.
Yeah, a lot of good points in there. And one thing I want to jump on there is the logic piece, because their logic is a perception. It's a filter through which we filter reality, the data that we're experiencing in reality. And logic is a way of organizing that data in a very linear fashion so that it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, we call it illogical. But logic is not the only way to engage with reality. And then you brought up intuition. And so we're talking about right brain, left brain differences here, right? So if you're in your left brain, you're going, at least if you're in the Western world, you're going to be predisposed to use logic as a way to filter reality and make sense out of it. But just because something's logical doesn't mean that, this is where the discernment comes in, doesn't mean that you have to engage with it or participate in it. And so really our left brain is there to take cues, and frankly, I would say orders from the right brain, the emotional center, the creative center of ourselves, that connects to our intuition. And once we know something aligns, and through listening, so the reason so many people don't have discernment these days is because we're a heavy left brain leaning society. So we pretty much shut off our emotions. We pretty much until they explode on somebody, right? But we don't know how to listen to the nuance of them and the wisdom that they're trying to help as a guidance system. We don't need to explode on people and yell and all of this, right? I mean, that shows that we have emotional children, really, that most adults are trapped inside of. And there's no way you're going to be able to discern very much when you're a walking emotional child about everything in life. And we have a lot of that going on right now with in the political discourse. It's children. It's crazy. And there's no discernment because their emotions are running wild. And then they try to rationalize, tell themselves rational lies and wrap it in logic for why the craziness they've just either accepted, agreed with, or actions they've taken somehow make sense in this fantastical universe, as opposed to dealing with reality as it is. And so we have a lot of people that are not able to deal with reality as it is. They only want to deal with a fantasy of what they wish it was. And usually it's in reaction to what they don't want. So they're an emotional reaction to what they don't want, even if the thing they don't want is the reality, right? And this is how people can drift into conspiratorial thinking and all of this. All discernment is the linchpin here, because if you can exercise discernment, and you can, which requires emotional sobriety, it requires being in situations that you may not agree with, and being able to hold those emotions in check, learn from them without letting them explode, and let your right brain guide your left brain. Let your right brain intuition, your emotions, and your creativity guide. And the only other thing I wanted to say about what you were just sharing is that the knowing of the self, we don't have like a fixed self that is constant. As human beings, we're really more like human becomings. We're constantly learning and evolving and adapting, and unless we choose not to. And a lot of people, I've known people over the years who be like, well, that's just who I am, as though there's this fixed block of concrete and there's no way that they can change or adapt or learn or evolve. It's just, that's who I am. And they'll defend it to the death. Well, that ego usually dies a very awful death, either through some kind of, it's sort of like reality's like, you'll never change, hold my beer, right? let me bank let me bankrupt you. Let me take all your relationships from you. Let me, steamroll you health wise. Yeah, no, we can all change and we must. Change is the only constant. Well, in order to be an agent of change, not all change is good. What kind of change, right? Well, so we advocate for change from a place of high intentionality. We advocate for change from a place of self-trust. We advocate from change from a place of discernment, which is what we're talking today about. It's definitely a complex subject, but if you're not even in the inquiry of whether I have good discernment or bad discernment or no discernment, and does discernment even matter, then you're going to find out it does matter, but you're going to find out because things are going to happen to you that because you didn't have discernment, you're going to wish you were paying attention and made a different choice, or we're hanging out with different people, or we're in a different place, or whatever the situation was, right? That you didn't have discernment around. And then you're like, oh, this sucks. So I would say that there's not a lot of discernment going on, for example, with what's happening with, to bring it into a couple of real world examples, what's happening with like Elon Musk right now. So this is a guy who's supposed to be running companies, and instead he's running around like an 11-year-old hacking away at the federal government, and there's no discernment there. It's like, oh, I don't think my shareholders are going to be happy that I'm not paying attention to the companies I started. And I'm instead now a unpaid, unofficial government chainsaw hacker to programs that people actually rely on. And oh, they're mad at me. Oh, my stock price is going down because they're mad at me. See, all of that could have been prevented if there was discernment. But he clearly is proven in this situation, at least, he has no discernment whatsoever. And that's just a macro example that is available for people to see. This whole thing about him being a genius, we can debate that all day long. I think if anything, he was a great genius at buying companies other people created and using government money to do it. Really good genius at how to use other people's money to make yourself look good. If that's a genius, then I guess he is. I don't think he is one. So this is like, but people want him to be a genius. So they see what they want to see, no discernment. He's not showing discernment. And what you can kind of see the whole unraveling of a situation when there's a lack of discernment. And it doesn't need to be that way. And this isn't about whether you like, I'm just using Elon as an example, doesn't mean whether you have to like him or not like him. This isn't a judgment. To your point, discernment and judgment are different. I'm not judging him as a person. I'm saying his behavior is exhibiting a lack of discernment because of the fallout that's starting to happen from his choices. That's a macro example in his life, but our life, we could look at the same. We could look at ourselves and we could say, oh, I had no discernment in that situation. I wanted something to be one way and I shut my eyes and ears off. I didn't learn how to listen. I was missing the cues. And so I made decisions that then came back and bit me in the ass. It was like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. Right. And to a certain extent, that's how we learn. So I'm not even judging people who don't have discernment unless they choose to not have discernment and to remain ignorant. Then that's where judgment comes in. It's like the person you were talking about. I cannot work with that person. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't innocent. It's not innocent ignorance when you're choosing to ignore things. That's willful ignorance, right? So anyway, it's a big topic, and I don't know if you have any final kind of parting words around this or thoughts as we wrap up today.
I think we need to have another conversation around it because as you were talking, there was another facet that came into the picture for me, and that would be the quantum physics principle of the observer effect. That discernment is about seeing reality, and I quote reality because reality it's subjective. It's like the paradox to discernment is that the very act of looking at something changes what we see. It goes back to what you're saying, that people will see what they want to see. Well, who is the observer of the thing? So you and I can look at a situation in business and you're going to see something totally different than me because of who you are. And so your observer effect of analyzing a situation is going to be very different than my observer effect. And so to me, that goes underneath of discernment, that it's more of a root to discernment of perception shapes our reality. We talk about that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You're the observer of reality. So you, me, as humans, our beliefs, our biases, our expectations, our experiences, all of that influences our perception.
Mm-hmm.
And so discernment, when you look at it through that lens, now discernment isn't just about observing something. It's about being aware of how you observe something with your perception and how your perception will alter what it is that you're seeing as well. And I think that to me goes back down to underneath of that. When I say back down, it's underneath of that is understanding who you really are. And those pieces, and we talk a lot about this in our program too, that if you don't like who you are, if you don't like the environment that you're in, you get to change that. But
you get to create something different.
Right. You've got to be able to look at the picture first and say, I like this, I don't like this. If I don't like this, what am I going to replace? What's the new belief or the new perception that I'm going to replace that with? And then that becomes your reality.
Yeah. And even more accurate, once you do the work of whole life architecture, it's no longer like or don't like, it's align or not align. Because there are things that I don't like, but they align with me.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't have to do them to get the outcome, I probably wouldn't. But the outcome I'm trying to produce aligns with what I'm trying to create in the world. So sometimes I have to not avoid the discomfort and not avoid the effort. There might be something that requires effort and discomfort that I need to go through. I might not like it, but it aligns with me. So I'm willing to put in the effort and go through the discomfort.
Great clarity. Thank you for that. Yeah, you and I have talked about this. We have somebody new that's on our team. And I said to you, I am so intimidated by this person, but it's something I want to lean into. This is great feeling. It's not an intimidation that I want to run from. It's an intimidation that says, holy cow, I'm about to be challenged. And I so welcome that. And I can't wait to be right there. And I find myself that in these meetings that we're having, I have absolutely nothing to say. I want to absorb every single thing that is coming out of this person's mouth. I know that what they bring to the table is significant. And I just want to be a student of that. And I want to lean into the discomfort of that piece. It's very uncomfortable to not be the smartest at the table sometimes, but it is a discomfort that I totally welcome.
It's the only way we evolve ourselves.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Totally agree. But there's the discernment of knowing this is a fear that I want to lean into. This is
That's right.
that I want to lean into. This is not like, oh my God, I'm afraid I'm going to run or I'm going to fight or I'm going to flight or freeze. This is uncomfortable, but it's the kind of discomfort I want because it aligns with where I'm going, where I choose to be going in life.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Well, in that case, we'll have a part 2 to this. I mean, these things are not ever clear threads. I don't want to mislead people to believing that, we're going to say something that's going to lead you to 10 steps to all your dreams are going to come true. Anyone who believes that, doesn't have any discernment. And so these things are complex because human beings are complex and we are a becoming. And from moment to moment, like you said, we have to slow down, check in. Does what's about to happen or what is happening align with me? Am I being willfully ignorant and shutting off my ears and my eyes? Or am I leaning into becoming a better listener and being able to discern the nuance of what maybe aligns, what maybe doesn't? Facts do matter. What's a fact? I mean, all of these things are really being wrestled with right now in the marketplace of ideas, as John Stuart Mill would put it, that we experience as social media right now. So we'll leave it there for this episode, but thank you all for tuning in. We'll have a part 2 to this and continue this discussion about discernment and all of the externalities that tie in with it, that we need to be attentive to in order to be powerful creators of our life and not just consuming a life and living a life that we are tolerating, but instead creating a life by design that we love. Well, we'll get back to that on another episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you all on another episode of The Most Important Conversations.
That concludes this episode of The Most Important Conversations. This in-depth conversation could set you on the path to self-improvement, which is essential if you want to be an effective leader and take meaningful action in your life. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of these stimulating discussions, You can find them at tmicglobal.com. Remember, the world is at a crossroads right now. You can't afford to waste this opportunity to take charge of your life, build meaningful relationships with others, and co-create a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.